Before we start, hit that subscribe to support the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is David Sterling, and I carried a security clearance that officially never existed for 12 years of my life. I served in what the government calls specialized reconnaissance operations, which is a polite way of saying I went places that don't appear on any map and did things that never happened according to any official record. I've kept quiet for 8 years since my discharge. But stage 4 pancreatic cancer has a way of clarifying your priorities about what secrets are worth taking to the grave. When people ask me about the most classified mission I ever undertook, they expect stories about foreign governments or terrorist cells or weapons programs hidden in desert compounds. They never expect me to tell them about Antarctica. They never expect me to explain why the most heavily guarded secret on this planet sits at the bottom of the world, buried under miles of ice that most humans will never be allowed to see. You need to understand something right now. I'm not some internet conspiracy theorist spinning wild theories about flat Earth or alien bases. I'm a former operative who spent 3 months at coordinates that would get me disappeared if I revealed them publicly. I've seen installations that make our most advanced military technology look like Stone Age tools. I've walked through facilities that operate on principles of physics that aren't supposed to exist. And I've met people whose job descriptions would sound like science fiction if you heard them in any other context. The mission briefing happened in a windowless room beneath the Pentagon that required 4 separate elevator rides and 3 different security clearances just to reach. Colonel Harrison, a woman whose steel-gray eyes suggested she'd seen things that would break most people's sanity, handed me a folder marked with classifications I'd never encountered before. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Agent Sterling, you've been selected for Operation Deep Freeze. Your destination is a research installation in Antarctica that officially doesn't exist. Your mission duration is classified. Your survival probability is classified. Your right to refuse this assignment expired the moment you walked into this room. Do you have any questions about parameters you're not cleared to know? The folder contained a single photograph of what looked like an endless expanse of white ice stretching to the horizon. No buildings, no landmarks, no indication of human presence whatsoever. But written on the back in red ink were coordinates and a single word that made my blood run cold: Guardian. Over the next 72 hours, I underwent medical procedures I'd never experienced before. Blood tests that required samples from locations I didn't know existed. Psychological evaluations that felt more like interrogations about my deepest fears and moral boundaries. Physical conditioning that pushed my body beyond what I thought was humanly possible, and injections of substances that the medics refused to identify beyond saying they were necessary for environmental adaptation. The transport to Antarctica wasn't on any aircraft I recognized. The flight manifest listed it as a routine supply run to McMurdo Station, but we never went anywhere near McMurdo. Instead, we flew for 14 hours over terrain that looked identical in every direction, endless white punctuated only by mountain ranges that cast shadows like broken teeth against the ice. When we finally landed, I understood immediately why this location required the highest possible security clearances. We weren't at some temporary research camp or weather station. We were at what could only be described as a fully operational military installation built into the ice itself. Runways carved directly into the frozen surface, hangars large enough to house aircraft I'd never seen before, and rising from the center of it all, a structure that defied everything I thought I knew about what was possible in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The installation extended deep underground, connected by tunnels that had been melted through solid ice using technology that generated heat without any visible power source. The walls were lined with some kind of metallic material that gave off its own faint luminescence. The air was warm despite being hundreds of feet below the surface, and everywhere I looked, personnel in unmarked uniforms moved with the purposeful efficiency of people maintaining something far more important than a research station. My commanding officer at the installation was Director Walsh, a man whose age was impossible to determine and whose background was completely classified. He spoke with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected global security without anyone outside this facility ever knowing those decisions had been made. "Welcome to Guardian Station. he said as he led me through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. What you're about to see and learn during your time here will fundamentally change your understanding of geopolitics, human history, and why certain regions of this planet remain off limits to civilian populations. Everything you witness here is classified beyond top secret. Everything you learn here will follow you for the rest of your life. And everything you experience here will convince you that some secrets exist for reasons more important than government transparency. The first thing he showed me was the perimeter defense system. From the outside, Guardian Station looked like nothing more than a collection of research buildings scattered across the ice. But beneath the surface, it was protected by weapons platforms that could eliminate threats from hundreds of miles away. Radar systems that could track objects moving anywhere in the southern hemisphere. And most disturbing of all, barriers that could make entire regions of Antarctica completely invisible to satellite surveillance. We control access to approximately 40% of the Antarctic continent, Walsh explained as we stood in a control room overlooking banks of monitors displaying real-time data from across the region. Every aircraft that enters restricted airspace is tracked and diverted. Every ship that approaches prohibited waters receives navigation guidance that steers them away from sensitive areas. And every government that attempts unauthorized exploration finds their equipment mysteriously malfunctioning before they can reach locations they're not supposed to discover. But why? I asked. What's down here that requires this level of security? Walsh smiled with the expression of someone about to reveal information that would change everything I thought I knew about the world. That's what you're here to find out. But I'll warn you now, Agent Sterling. Once you understand what we're protecting, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that everything civilians believe about global politics and international relations is essentially theater designed to distract them from the real power structures that determine humanity's future. Over the following days, I was introduced to sections of Guardian Station that grew progressively more classified and more disturbing. Research laboratories conducting experiments on materials that didn't match any known elements. Communication arrays maintaining contact with installations I wasn't authorized to know the locations of. And most unsettling of all, personnel quarters housing individuals whose job descriptions were classified above my clearance level. But it was during my second week that I discovered the real reason for Guardian Station's existence. Walsh led me to an elevator that descended for what felt like an impossible distance through solid ice. When the doors opened, we stepped into a chamber that challenged everything I thought I understood about what was possible in Antarctica. The space was enormous, easily the size of several aircraft hangars, but it wasn't carved from ice. The walls appeared to be made of some kind of advanced material that generated its own heat and light. Banks of computer systems filled the center of the chamber, displaying information in languages I didn't recognize. And suspended from the ceiling were what could only be described as massive screens, showing real-time imagery from locations around the globe. "This is the real Guardian Station," Walsh said quietly. "Everything else you've seen is cover for this facility. We monitor and coordinate activities that most world governments don't even know exist. We track threats that could destabilize entire civilizations. And we maintain systems that ensure certain information never reaches public awareness." The screens showed cities I recognized and others I'd never seen before. Military installations in remote deserts, research facilities hidden beneath urban centers, and, most disturbing of all, what appeared to be underground complexes connected by transportation systems that spanned entire continents. Walsh noticed my confusion and gestured toward a console where a technician was monitoring data streams from dozens of locations simultaneously. What you're looking at is the Global Coordination Network. Every major government has installations like Guardian Station, though none of them admit it publicly. We share intelligence about threats that transcend national boundaries. We coordinate responses to situations that could affect the entire planet. And we maintain protocols that ensure certain discoveries remain classified, regardless of which country makes them. The technician looked up from her console with the expression of someone reporting routine information. "Sir, we're tracking unusual seismic activity in Sector 7. Ground-penetrating radar shows possible structural changes at depth level 5. Walsh's face went pale in a way that suggested this wasn't routine at all. "How long until we can get a reconnaissance team down there?" 12 hours if we use the rapid deployment system, 24 if we follow standard safety protocols, use rapid deployment, and wake up Dr. Chen. Tell her we might need the deep excavation equipment. As the technician hurried away, Walsh turned to me with an expression that mixed urgency with something that looked like fear. Agent Sterling, what I'm about to show you is the reason Guardian Station exists. It's the reason we maintain installations like this in the most remote regions of every continent. And it's the reason certain areas of the planet remain absolutely forbidden to civilian access. He led me to another elevator, this one requiring a key card, a biometric scan, and a verbal authorization code. The descent took even longer than before, and when the doors opened, we stepped into a tunnel that had been carved through solid bedrock rather than ice. The walls were lined with the same luminescent material I'd seen elsewhere, but here it pulsed with a rhythm that reminded me uncomfortably of a heartbeat. We walked for what felt like miles through corridors that branched off in directions I couldn't track. Other personnel moved past us with equipment I didn't recognize, their faces showing the focused intensity of people working on something far more important than routine maintenance. Finally, we reached a massive chamber that made everything else I'd seen look small by comparison. The space was so large that the far walls disappeared into darkness beyond the reach of the lighting systems. But what dominated the chamber wasn't its size. It was the structure in the center. Rising from the floor was what could only be described as a wall, but calling it a wall didn't begin to capture what I was looking at. The surface appeared to be made of the same material as the luminescent panels, but it stretched upward beyond what the lighting could illuminate. It curved away in both directions, suggesting it was part of something circular with a diameter measured in miles rather than feet. "This is what we call the barrier," Walsh said quietly. "We've been studying it for 70 years, and we still don't understand what it's made of or how it was constructed. What we do know is that it extends completely around a region approximately 200 miles in diameter. It goes down through the bedrock farther than our deepest drilling equipment can reach, and it generates an energy field that interferes with every form of detection equipment we've developed." I stared at the massive structure, trying to process what I was seeing. Who built it? That's the question that keeps everyone here awake at night. The construction techniques are beyond anything in our technological capability. The materials don't match anything in our periodic table. And the energy output suggests power sources that operate on principles we don't understand. But here's what really matters, Agent Sterling. This isn't the only one. He pulled out a tablet displaying a world map marked with red circles. Similar barriers have been discovered on every continent, always in remote regions, always heavily classified, always surrounded by installations like Guardian Station that exist to study them and prevent public discovery. The coordinates I'd memorized showed locations in the Amazon rainforest, the Australian outback, the Canadian Arctic, the Sahara Desert, and the Himalayas. Each site was marked with the same designation, Guardian Station. "How many people know about this?" I asked. "Fewer than 1,000 worldwide. Presidents and prime ministers receive briefings about potential security threats, but they're not told the complete truth. Military commanders know about the installations, but they think they're researching advanced materials or monitoring geological activity. Even most of the personnel working at Guardian Stations think they're involved in classified weapons research or environmental monitoring. But what's inside the barriers?" Walsh's expression grew even more serious. "That's why you're here. We've finally developed technology that might allow us to penetrate the energy field without triggering the defensive responses we've encountered in previous attempts. Your mission is to be part of the first team to get inside and document what we find." Over the next week, I underwent training for equipment I'd never imagined existed. Suits designed to protect against energy fields that could disrupt human nervous systems. Communication devices that could function despite electromagnetic interference that rendered conventional electronics useless. And most disturbing of all, weapons designed to defend against threats that the briefing materials described only as unknown, hostile entities. The penetration team consisted of 6 specialists, each with expertise in areas that remained classified even from each other. Dr. Sarah Chen, the geologist who'd been awakened when seismic activity had been detected. Marcus Rodriguez, a physicist whose background in exotic matter research made him essential for analyzing whatever technology we might encounter. Lieutenant Ashley Kim, a special forces operator whose combat experience included situations that weren't mentioned in any official military records. Our entry point was a section of the barrier where the energy field showed fluctuations that might allow temporary penetration. The equipment required to create even a small opening took 3 days to position and calibrate. When we finally activated it, the results were unlike anything I'd witnessed in 12 years of classified operations. The surface of the barrier didn't crack or break. Instead, it seemed to flow like liquid while maintaining its solid appearance, creating an opening just large enough for our team to pass through single file. Beyond the opening was darkness so complete that our most powerful light seemed to be absorbed rather than reflected. Dr. Chen checked her instruments as we prepared to enter. Energy readings are off the charts, but they're stable. Atmospheric composition appears normal. Ground-penetrating radar shows structures approximately 2 miles ahead. Lieutenant Kim took point, her weapon systems active but set to defensive protocols. Remember, we document everything, engage nothing unless directly threatened, and maintain constant communication with base station. As we stepped through the opening in the barrier, I felt a sensation like walking through an invisible curtain of electricity. Every nerve in my body tingled, and for a moment, my vision filled with patterns of light that seemed to convey information I couldn't understand. Then we were inside, and everything changed. The atmosphere inside the barrier was different in ways that defied measurement. The air felt thicker, almost viscous, and carried scents that reminded me of ozone mixed with something organic I couldn't identify. Our instruments registered normal oxygen levels, but breathing required conscious effort, as if my lungs were working against invisible resistance. The ground beneath our feet wasn't ice or rock. It was smooth, seamless, made of the same luminescent material as the barrier itself, but darker, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to respond to our presence. Each step we took caused ripples of light to spread outward from our boots, creating patterns that lingered for several seconds before fading. 2 miles ahead, just as Dr. Chen's radar had indicated, structures began to emerge from the darkness, but calling them buildings would be like calling the ocean a puddle. These weren't constructed in any sense I understood construction. They appeared to have been grown, shaped from the same flowing material as everything else in this place, rising organically from the ground in spirals and curves that hurt to look at directly. Lieutenant Kim's voice crackled through our communication system. Base station, we have visual confirmation of artificial structures. Repeat, we are looking at constructions of unknown origin inside the perimeter. The response came back immediately. Copy that, penetration team. Document everything. Maintain safe distance until we can analyze your video feeds. Dr. Chen was running continuous scans with equipment that registered readings she'd never seen before. The electromagnetic signatures are incredible. Whatever powers this place is generating energy output equivalent to a small nuclear reactor. But there's no radiation. No heat signature. It's like the energy is being contained or channeled through processes that don't follow conventional physics. Marcus Rodriguez was studying samples he'd collected from the ground surface. This material isn't in any database. It's not metal, not ceramic, not any form of composite we've developed. But it's clearly engineered. The molecular structure shows patterns too precise to be natural, but too complex to be manufactured with any technology I'm familiar with. As we moved closer to the structures, details became visible that made my training in classified operations feel inadequate. The surfaces weren't smooth up close. They were covered in symbols, patterns, designs that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Some looked like writing, others like mathematical equations, still others like blueprints for machines I couldn't begin to understand. The largest structure rose from the center of the complex. A tower or spire that disappeared into the darkness above our light range. Surrounding it were smaller buildings connected by walkways that curved through the air without visible support. And everywhere, that same pulsing luminescence, creating a rhythm that seemed to be communicating something just beyond the edge of comprehension. Walsh's voice came through our radio with tension I'd never heard from him before. "Penetration team, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations from your location. Whatever you're approaching is responding to your presence. Be prepared for immediate extraction if conditions become hostile." But the energy fluctuations weren't hostile. They were almost welcoming, like the entire complex was awakening to acknowledge our arrival. Lights began activating in sequence, illuminating pathways that led toward the central spire. Doorways that had been invisible moments before began to glow, revealing entrances sized for beings roughly our height, but with proportions that suggested different physiology. Dr. Chen's instruments were recording everything, but her face showed the expression of someone whose understanding of reality was being systematically dismantled. These power readings don't make sense. We're detecting energy sources that should be impossible to contain, let alone control. Whatever civilization built this place had capabilities that make our most advanced technology look primitive. Lieutenant Kim was scanning for threats, but her weapon systems were detecting nothing that registered as dangerous. No heat signatures indicating living beings, no electromagnetic emissions suggesting active defense systems. Just the overwhelming presence of intelligence embedded in every surface, every curve, every symbol that decorated the structures around us. I found myself drawn toward one of the smaller buildings, a structure whose entrance was clearly designed for human proportions. The doorway was open, revealing an interior filled with the same soft luminescence that permeated everything in this place. But inside, the walls were covered with what could only be described as displays, showing images and data streams that seemed to be monitoring locations around the globe. The displays showed familiar landmarks. The Pentagon, where my mission had originated. Other Guardian stations scattered across remote regions of every continent. But they also showed places I didn't recognize. Underground installations that appeared to be far larger and more advanced than anything I'd seen at Guardian Station. Marcus joined me at the displays, his physicist's training helping him interpret some of the data streams. These are real-time feeds. Whatever system is running this place has access to surveillance networks covering the entire planet. But look at this section here. These coordinates don't match any known installations. The coordinates he indicated showed locations beneath major population centers: New York, London, Moscow, Beijing. Each site appeared to house massive underground complexes connected by transportation networks that spanned continents. The scale was staggering, suggesting a global infrastructure that operated completely outside any government's knowledge or control. Dr. Chen called out from another section of the building. "You need to see this. I've found what looks like a control interface, but it's not designed for human operation." The interface she discovered covered an entire wall, composed of surfaces that responded to touch by generating new symbols and patterns. When she placed her hand on one section, the entire display changed, showing what appeared to be schematic diagrams of the barrier itself. But the schematics revealed something that made my blood run cold. The barrier wasn't just a wall. It was part of a massive network of interconnected structures that extended deep into the Earth's core. Lines of energy connected similar installations on every continent, creating a global grid that pulsed with the same rhythm we'd been feeling since entering this place. Lieutenant Kim's voice cut through our fascination with the discovery. "Team, we've got movement. Something's approaching from the central spire." Through the transparent sections of the building, we could see lights moving along the elevated walkways. But these weren't the random patterns we'd observed earlier. They moved with purpose, with intelligence, heading directly toward our location. Walsh's voice crackled urgently through our communications. "Penetration team, we're reading massive energy spikes throughout the entire barrier system. Whatever you've activated down there is affecting installations on multiple continents. Prepare for immediate extraction." But extraction wasn't an option. The opening we'd used to enter had sealed itself, and our equipment readings showed the barrier's energy field had increased to levels that would make penetration impossible with our current technology. We were trapped inside with whatever intelligence operated this place, and it was coming to meet us. The lights approaching along the walkways resolved into individual figures as they drew closer. They moved with fluid grace, maintaining perfect formation, heading toward us with the purposeful efficiency of beings conducting a planned encounter rather than responding to intruders. Dr. Chen's instruments were going haywire. Energy readings are through the roof, but I'm not detecting any hostile intent. Whatever's coming appears to be communicating, trying to establish some form of contact protocol. Marcus was analyzing the symbols on the interface wall, which had begun changing more rapidly since the figures had started approaching. I think this entire structure is some kind of communication system. These symbols aren't just decorative. They're conveying information, trying to establish a common language framework. Through the building's transparent sections, we could see the figures had reached ground level and were approaching our location. They were roughly human in size and proportions, but they moved with coordination that suggested shared consciousness rather than individual decision-making. Lieutenant Kim had her weapons ready but hadn't activated targeting systems. Her training in classified situations included protocols for contact with unknown intelligences, and everything about this encounter suggested communication rather than confrontation. The figures stopped just outside the building's entrance, arranging themselves in a pattern that seemed designed to be non-threatening. When the first one stepped forward, I could see it clearly for the first time. Now I'm dying in a hospital bed, and they think the cancer has spread to my brain because I keep talking about impossible structures beneath Antarctic ice. But I know what I saw. I know what we found. And I know that everything we believe about who controls this planet is a carefully constructed lie. The barriers aren't protecting us from something outside. They are protecting something inside from us. When the nuclear war comes, when the surface becomes uninhabitable, those installations will ensure the right people survive to rebuild civilization according to their design. Make of that what you will.